I'm a divorce attorney, and these are the 10 commandments that you need to not get divorced. Hi, I'm Matt Osley, and I'm a divorce attorney that wants to put himself out of business. And it's kind of a funny thing because I help people move through divorce, but what I'd really love is if people could stay married. And so I talk to people constantly who are going through divorces and have unfortunately gotten to the place in life where they cannot keep their marriage together. And that's sad. What I do, I hope, is bring a little light to those people's lives and help them move through to a better day. But in this video, I want to help you avoid getting divorced. The first rule of avoiding divorce is commit every day. A lot of times we think of the commitment to marriage as a one-time commitment, something that we're going to do at the altar. And then we've committed to our marriage and that's it. Well, that's not the way that life works. Every day we have to wake up and renew our commitment to what it is that we're doing. A lot of people misunderstand what commitment is. And so I like to think of commitment in terms of stepping onto a boat. When you're on the dock and you're about to get on a boat, the worst thing that you can do is put one leg on the dock and one leg on the boat. The boat's going to move away from the dock and you're going to fall into the water. Instead, it's much easier to just commit and hop into the boat. And the same thing is true in your marriage. You have to think, how am I going to bend all of my will today into creating a good marriage, into serving my spouse, into loving my spouse, into making things better for us today. And if you don't do that each day, ultimately you'll drift apart. Rule number 2 is, if you want to improve your marriage, you've got to improve yourself. One of the most poisonous things that you can think of in a marriage is, our marriage needs to improve, my spouse needs to improve. That's just never going to work out because you can't control your spouse or any other human being on the face of the planet. The person that you can control is you, and your marriage is at least 50% you. But the fact of the matter is, your marriage, as far as you perceiving your marriage, is much more than 50% you, because your life revolves around you. And so if you improve you, your marriage will be much, much better. And you're in control of you, so you actually can improve you. So if you want to make your marriage better, work on yourself. Rule number 3, no secrets. Now, this is not a license to open up your past and vomit a bunch of junk onto your spouse, okay? The point of this rule is that today, as you're going through your day, don't do new things that you're going to need to hide from your spouse. And yes, if there are old things that do need to be dealt with, deal with them in an appropriate and loving way. But do not dredge up unnecessary things from your past just so that you have no secrets. The point is don't hide stuff from your spouse now. If you're hiding things from your spouse, that means that there's something wrong in your relationship that needs to be dealt with. You need to confront that with your spouse so that you and your spouse can get on the same page and that you don't have to hide anything. And I promise you that if you are not hiding things in your life and you can just live your life in the open and in the light, you will have a better life and a better marriage. Rule number 4, you are on a team. You have to work together as a team. And I like to use sports analogies when I talk about this because that's usually how we think of as teams. If you're talking about baseball, look, there are lots of different positions that have to be played in baseball. But unlike a baseball team, there are only 2 players on your team, a husband and a wife. And so in that, you're each going to wear a whole bunch of different hats. You're going to play a whole bunch of different positions. And the 2 of you need to be talking about, what positions are we playing? What roles are we taking? And who's wearing hats when? And sometimes those roles can switch. Sometimes you can play those roles for a little while and then do something else. But the 2 of you have to be working together. One of the big things that my wife and I talk about a lot is goal alignment. When we are getting frustrated with each other, it's because our goals have shifted. We're starting to go in different directions. We have to have a conversation about getting back on the same goal. And so that's about teamwork. Think of your marriage as a team and think about how you can play together to win the game. If you're playing different games, if you're on different teams, that's a recipe for disaster. Rule number 5 is priority. Your spouse has to be the priority in your life. If they are not the priority in your life, I don't think it's that hard for people to imagine that your marriage is going to fall apart. But a lot of times people don't really think through what it means for their spouse to be the number one priority. And so one of the things that sometimes really surprises people is when I say, I love my wife more than I love my children. And this blows people's minds, like, oh, aren't children the most important? Aren't they first? No. You know what? My children are going to live with me for hopefully about 18 years. And then they're going to be adults and they're going to move out and live on their own. I may live with my wife for 40 or 50 years or more, I hope. And so the point is that my spouse and I are locked together for life. She has to be the most important thing to me during the time that we have kids and during the time that those children become adults and in the time before we had children. And so she's always going to be with me. I have to put her first now and always. And I express this to my children. I actually learned this lesson when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, and somehow mom was getting on my nerves, and I don't remember the exact situation, but essentially my dad realized that I didn't know that mom was more important than me. And he asked me, son, do you realize that I love your mother more than I love you, and that your mother is more important than you are? And I didn't realize that. I didn't know. And that really hurt me in that moment. But later, as I matured and grew, I realized how right he was in saying that and how incredibly important it is to know that in a marriage. And so if you didn't realize that your spouse needs to be most important over your children, realize that. Start to think about that more. And the same is true with a job or any other thing that you're putting in your life. You can get a new job, you can get a new house, you can get a new car, all kinds of things. But your wife, she's there for life, or your husband is there for life. They're the most important. All right, rule number 6 is never, never, never say negative things about your spouse to anyone other than a counselor. If you're not paying someone to complain and there's not a written confidentiality agreement, do not say anything negative. It burns me up when I am out in public somewhere and somebody starts ragging on their spouse and tearing them down. And I know that that's so incredibly hurtful. And just think about what happens when that whatever negative thing they're saying goes around through the grapevine and comes back around to their spouse when their spouse is out hanging out with their friends or whatever, and they hear that negative thing repeated back to them. That is so destructive. And it's very easy to think about the exact opposite. What happens if you're going around telling everybody about all the wonderful, amazing things that you love about your spouse, and then your spouse is out somewhere and one of their friends says, hey, I've heard that you're great at this, or you're great at that, or you're this amazing whatever. People are saying amazing things about you. You're like, whoa, really? Who's saying those things? Where did that come from? Well, I think, your husband or your wife was telling us about how great you are. Man, like that does something powerful deep inside of you. Man, say uplifting and wonderful things. If you're tearing down your spouse, basically what you're saying about yourself is that you're a horrible person, and the best that you could do is find another horrible person that could tolerate you. Rule number 7. So this is one of the most controversial rules that I have. I get a lot of pushback on this, but I'm just going to jump right into it. You must have joint finances. Now, people are going to immediately jump all over me on this one, and they're going to say, you don't know me, you don't know my relationship, you don't realize that my spouse is a mess with money, or we can't agree on anything, or whatever the excuse is. And let me see if I can illustrate this point by exaggerating the point. What you're doing when you say we have separate finances, like we have separate bank accounts and separate whatever, is we are doing this in order to avoid having a necessary confrontation, a necessary conversation about getting on the same page and having the same goals. So we're going to avoid doing that by separating. And so an exaggeration of that would be if you argue with each other when you're together, when you see each other, then maybe you should just go live in separate houses. Then you wouldn't argue with each other anymore because you wouldn't see each other anymore. And by the way, don't call each other, because if you talk, you might have an argument. So just don't talk. Go live in separate houses and don't talk to each other. Well, that solves the argument problem. You've avoided it. But are you still married? You're missing out on the joy. You're missing out on the great things that come from marriage by separating. And as soon as you start to separate in one area, you'll start to separate in others. And it seems like separating your finances is something that's small and something that solves some problems. It's kind of like, pushing that easy button. But it's a shortcut. It's a shortcut that'll kill you, and it's a shortcut that robs you from the joy that you can have by getting on the same page. So trust me in this, you need to find a way to combine your finances. All right, rule number 8. So this one is PG-13, so if you have small children, volume down. Love languages. You have to know your spouse's love language, how they receive love. And there's a fantastic book called The 5 Love Languages. And in that book, it talks about ways that people experience love. And it's very important to know how your spouse experiences love, because it's probably different from the way that you experience love. Those 5 love languages are quality time, words of affirmation, physical touch, acts of service, and gifts. And so each one of those things is a different way to experience love. And we all experience love in all of those 5 ways. Everybody at some point in their life wants to be touched by another human being somehow. Now, that may not be the thing that they love the most, but everybody loves a loving touch, right? We think about our mom holding us as a child, or dad giving us a hug and saying, congratulations, I'm proud of you, right? These are loving touches that we appreciate in ways that we experience love. In the same way, people like to be complimented. Now, maybe they don't like to be complimented all the time, or don't like to be complimented in public. They feel embarrassment, but everybody likes a compliment. They like some nice words. Quality time. We all want to spend some time together. That is the basis of relationships. It means more to some people than others. Acts of service, right? Some people, if you do a little bit of kindness for them, if you open that door for that lady, or you wash the dishes for your wife, or you crack that beer open for your husband before the game, those little acts of service can be very meaningful. Some more than others to different people. And then gifts. Some people love to give gifts, love to receive gifts, and it's not about big dollar amounts or anything else. It's about an idea and a thought. And here's the deal. If you can figure out which one of those things really speaks to your spouse, then instead of wasting your time doing loving actions that your spouse doesn't really care about, you can get huge bang for your buck by doing the thing that your spouse does care about. And ultimately, this is going to lead you to being able to have a better sexual relationship. And so all the time, spouses, both men and women, are wondering, how do I get the sex that I want? How do I get the amount of sex that I want? How do I get the kind of sex that I want? Well, the answer to that is, if you know your spouse's love language and you are filling up that love bank, that is the driver to great sex. That is when you're talking about what romance is that overpouring of the spirit, when your love bank is full up, when somebody, remember when you were dating and every little thing that they did was wonderful and amazing? Well, that is because you both were working so hard to love each other the way that the other person wanted to be loved, and that love is overflowing. And when it's overflowing, that is when you have the kind of sex that you want and the volume of sex that you want. All right, rule number 9. So this one may seem incredibly obvious, but it has to be said because there are couples that don't do this. And the rule is communicate, communicate, communicate. Guys, ladies, we have to make time for each other to communicate. And a lot of times you don't think about scheduling time to communicate. You're just, talking to each other as you run out the door, or this, that, and the other thing on the phone. No, you need to have real dates. And a lot of times people think, oh, let's go on a couple date. Couple dates are awesome. We love going on couple dates, but that is not the same. We don't have the same types of conversations when we're on a couple date as when we are alone by ourselves with empty, uninterrupted time where we can speak from deep in our hearts. One of the things that I've found in my marriage, some of the best conversations that we've had are conversations that we've had while driving in the car to go to our date. And so we try to intentionally plan dates that are far away, that require us to do lots of driving, because that puts us in a situation where we're in a car alone together with no interruptions and nothing to do but talk about the things that are on our hearts and on our minds. And when you're quiet and alone over a long enough period of time, ultimately the only thing that you can do is talk about what you've been thinking about. And that is critical to having a good marriage. All right, rule number 10. This is a huge one. Couples that pray together stay together. I can tell you that the statistics are, if you are a couple that is praying together on a daily basis, there's about a 94% chance that you're going to stay married. And there are really good reasons why this is true. There is something that's powerful about believing in a higher power together and sharing that together and speaking words of blessing over each other and desiring the best for each other in the presence of God. And a relationship ultimately with Jesus is the most powerful and strongest foundation for any marriage. Every team has some kind of something that is bigger than itself that binds it together. Think about college football teams. If you're thinking about Alabama has their uniforms that never change. It's part of their identity. There's a history, and there is something about Alabama that's bigger than that one team seeking that one championship. And they have pictures in the hallways, they have banners, they have statues, all of these things to honor the tradition that has come before them and to set an example for what's coming after them. That team has a bigger goal than just accomplishing a championship for that year. They're living into the legacy of an organization. The same thing can be true in a marriage, right? There's something bigger than the two of us sitting around pleasuring ourselves. That bigger thing for us is a relationship with Jesus Christ. If you're a secular person and you don't believe in God, you can also have bigger things that your marriage is wrapped around. I don't think that that's as beneficial as having that thing being faith in the Lord, but certainly can. There has to be something that's bigger than just making yourselves happy. That's a necessary component. And so praying together each day is something that draws the hearts of the couple together and keeps you from drifting apart. It'll save your marriage. Rule number 11. This is a little bit of a bonus rule, but I think it's still really important. And the rule is that we don't have friendships with people of the opposite sex. This doesn't mean that we can't have couple friends or that kind of thing, but what it does mean is that one-on-one, we're not going to ride in a car together with someone of the opposite sex. One-on-one, we're not going to eat a meal together with someone of the opposite sex. I'm not going to be DMing people on social media if they're of the opposite sex, not one-on-one. I'm not going to be texting, right, someone of the opposite sex, one-on-one. Those are things that we're no longer doing in a marriage. And one of the easiest places for this to happen is in the workplace, because it's normal for bosses and employees to do things and have meetings and those types of things. And so sometimes people get tripped up and think, oh, because it's work related, I can do it. Well, do you know where most affairs occur? They occur at work, with a coworker or with a boss or with a subordinate. So that's one of the places where you need to be the most careful about what you're doing and protecting your relationship. A lot of times people get tripped up, oh, how do I tell my boss, or how do I tell my employer, or how do I tell my coworkers? Look, it's really easy. The point is to make sure that your boss or coworkers, whoever, understand that this is not about you. What I'm about to tell you is about me and my spouse in our relationship. My spouse and I have an agreement. And that agreement is that we're not going to ride in the same car, we're not going to eat meals, or we're not going to do whatever it is. And so it has nothing to do with you. I just need to honor the commitment that I've made to my spouse. Can we just bring another person to lunch? Can we just bring another person in the car? So that you can allow me to honor the agreement that I have with my spouse. Let me tell you something. If your coworker, or your boss, or your employer, whoever it is, has a problem with that, just quit. That is not a place you want to be. Let's move on. There's no point in you building strong friendships with people of the opposite sex. You have a spouse, love that person, live into that person. Find some people of your own gender that you can have safe relationships with. That is going to build trust, and it will be an appropriate boundary for you to have in your marriage. I hope that these 11 commandments of marriage have been helpful to you, and I would love to hear what your thoughts are. I am sure that a lot of you are going to disagree about a lot of these commandments, and I would love to hear what your opinions are and what you think about it. And if we get some really great comments about things that people disagree, I may try to make some follow-up videos talking about those disagreements and what I think about them. So thanks for your time. Thanks for watching.